I never liked Dark Souls. I tried playing it back when it first released on PC, but I quit soon after I encountered the Taurus Demon boss. This would end up haunting me for like a decade, and I think part of the reason is because Dark Souls was unlike any other game that I played at the time. I didn't understand the appeal of playing such a difficult game, only to die over and over again. It just felt like a waste of time to me. The worst part about not being able to enjoy the game was that it had practically everything I love. A dark fantasy setting, berserk references everywhere, and an incredible amount of lore. Just a few months ago, I decided to play Bloodborne, which is another From Software title. I thought I was going to rage quit just like I did with Dark Souls all those years ago, but nope, I ended up loving the game. And so I thought if I could get through Bloodborne, I might as well go back and give Dark Souls another chance. After playing for only a few hours, my perspective of the game changed entirely. So Dark Souls is technically a spiritual successor to another title called Demon Souls, but this one is what made the whole "wow, this is really hard" type of game mainstream. Every challenging game that came after it would be referred to as Souls-like, and the Dark Souls of the genre. I know that talking about the difficulty of the Souls-born ring games is cliché by now, but I still think it's an important reminder to newcomers. The game is unforgiving because almost everything is out to get you in its world. Sure, you can cheese your way out of certain situations, but more often than not, you'll need to overcome them, and to overcome them means to die over and over again until you succeed. So Dark Souls and the games that come after it require a lot of patience and perseverance. It's totally understandable if it's not your thing. I mean, I was on the same boat not too long ago. But if one of the games clicks for you, I think it can shape up to be one of the best experiences you'll ever have in a video game. With all of that said, let's dive into the world of Dark Souls. So before you get to play, you'll need to customize your character. You can choose from a variety of classes, from magic users, warriors, and the like. Whatever you choose will determine your starting gear and stats. As for the gift, you just need to select an item that you think is most useful at the start of the game. After doing all that, you can customize your character's physical appearance however you like. The customization is pretty deep actually. If you consider how Dark Souls originally released in 2011, there are sliders for everything here. But I personally had a hard time trying to make a decent looking character, which was fine for me because I was going to look like this for most of the game anyway. Once you finish creating your character, you'll get treated to a stunning opening cutscene that sets the tone of the game. Dark Souls takes place in a world that's slowly dying. Most humans have gone hollow, which basically means that they suffer from a curse that resurrects them after death, making them gradually lose their minds. Because of that, all of the undead are gathered and locked in an asylum to wait for the end of the world. Fortunately, you get to play as a chosen undead, so you get the opportunity to escape and go on a quest. Dark Souls is known for its subtle storytelling, which is why when you start the game, you get very little insight about your goal. Everything you'll learn about the world and the story is done by exploring, fighting enemies, and talking to NPCs. Bits of lore are even shown on item descriptions, like seemingly random items have descriptions that can link to characters and places, making the story kind of like a puzzle that needs to be pieced together. But even then, it doesn't make for a complete picture, which is why the game has room for dozens of interpretations. Despite taking place in a dying world, Dark Souls is filled with a number of NPCs. Some are merchants, while others are adventurers with different goals in mind. I loved listening to what they had to say and hearing that creepy laugh that almost everyone had. But just like the storytelling and everything else in the game, some NPCs, along with their quest lines, can be easily missed. But it was always a surprise to bump into them in the most unexpected places. Now, the environments in Dark Souls might look generic to someone who has never played the game, but its world is unlike any other. It's atmospheric in a dreamy way. and there is no map in the game, so exploring sparks a sense of mystery, and there's no music most of the time, so all you'll hear is the sound of your own footsteps and the clanking of your armor, and that's excluding the sound of enemies hunting you down. What made exploring even more fun are the items. You never know what to expect when you go to corners and different paths. Like, there could be a cool sword or a nice armor set. It really helped to play online too. The world never felt lonely because you can see phantoms of other players online and the messages that they left behind. These messages were great because they gave strategies and tips that led me to hidden paths and items. The final moments of other players can be seen too if you interact with their bloodstains, which was helpful when I was carefully exploring certain areas. So going back to the game's look and design, I know the game's more than 10 years old now, and while it shows its age at times, I think it has a certain style that still makes it look really good. So it was always exciting to go from exploring castles to creepy forests and underground places. And what I loved about the level design is how almost everything is interconnected. I was always surprised whenever I was exploring a new area, only to find a shortcut that led to the game's main hub, Firelink Shrine. The downside to exploring is all the backtracking. This might not be a problem to some players, but for others it might be tiring going through the same pathways with limited fast travel options. You might need to defeat a few enemies along the way too, so it adds to the travel time. Now, if you're used to playing fast-paced action games, then the combat in Dark Souls will take some time to get used to. Like, I think one of the reasons why I quit the game all those years ago was because I was approaching it like other games. And by other games, I mean the ones that let me get away with mindlessly attacking enemies and generally being careless. The combat takes some time to get used to because it feels slow and methodical. You're more likely to survive if you observe enemies and wait for openings. And you can never spam attacks because you have limited stamina. Actions like sprinting, rolling, and attacking all consume stamina, so managing it is a huge part of the game. It takes a few seconds to regenerate, which can be the difference between life and death if you're in the middle of a fight. The great thing about Dark Souls is if whatever you're doing isn't working, you can always try adapting. The game provides a lot of tools that you can use for different situations, providing plenty of room for experimentation if you don't like using certain weapons. The standard weapons alone have so much variety. There are daggers, axes, hammers, swords, bows, and so much more. And depending on the weapons you use, you can slash, parry, thrust, or strike at enemies. But of course there are limitations. Each weapon type has certain stat requirements, so you can't properly wield every single one that you acquire, unless you level up the appropriate stats. Certain weapons will require a lot of strength and intelligence, while others need more dexterity. As for magic, I didn't use magic for most of my playthrough because I didn't know how to use it. I tried to cast a fireball early on, but my character kept doing that head-scratching animation. Instead of figuring it out, I shrugged it off and forgot about it until the end of the game. But I've learned how to cast them since then, sort of. My build is melee focused, so I didn't have the stats needed for a lot of spells. Now, armor naturally provides protection from both physical and elemental damage, but that's just the surface level. Some armor provides protection against specific attacks like strikes and thrusts, while elemental ones protect against elements like fire and lightning damage. Heavy armor is difficult to move around in, but it makes up for it with high defense. Your endurance level will impact your equip load, so having higher levels of it will make you less likely to be slowed down by heavier armor sets. Early on in my playthrough, I mainly used medium armor sets while wielding a shield and a broadsword, but I switched to using a claymore later on, and it carried me till the end of the game. So with all of those tools at your disposal, things get easier, right? Yes and no. Enemies in this game are brutal. They can hit real hard and they will chase you if you run away. Even the weakest and most common ones are deadly if you're not careful. Like seriously, these scrawny torch guys scare me way more than the weirder creatures in the game. Every time you die, you'll respawn at the last bonfire you rested in. These places are kinda like mini checkpoints that you can rest in. You can refill your healing flasks there, and as long as you have souls, you can do things like level up your character and upgrade your equipment. Souls are basically the currency of the game, so defeating enemies and collecting certain items all grant you souls. But the catch is, you lose all the souls you're carrying whenever you die. They can be retrieved by going back to the same place, but it can be risky, and there's a chance that you'll lose them for good if you die once again. The game does get easier as you level up your character and upgrade your equipment, and every death is a learning experience, so you'll feel more familiar with areas and enemy attacks. The enemies always spawn in the same spots too, so it won't take long until you memorize their placement and movesets. A lot of enemies are reused, but there was generally a good variety of enemy types. Like there are skeletons, knights, and mushroom people. Most of them have weak points too, so there are multiple ways to kill them. Some are easily parried, while others are more susceptible to certain elements. The bosses in the game are a real treat though. These fights are literally one of the few moments where you hear music in the game, so it makes things even more epic. Not every boss stood out to me, but I like the variety, and the fights were generally great. Except for Bed of Chaos. That was the only boss fight that I really wanted to finish as soon as possible. I got so tired of being knocked around that I wore my heaviest armor and dual-wielded shields. But yeah, when I was having a hard time with the bosses, I would experiment by using special items and equipping different accessories, armor sets, and weapons. Losing to the same boss wasn't very fun, but I loved the satisfaction I felt when I finally beat them. Like defeating the Taurus Demon was a special moment for me. I honestly had a hard time fighting it when I picked up the game again. I tried different strategies, but I still experienced all kinds of deaths. And as a beginner, the path going from the bonfire to the boss room was tiring to run through every time I respawned. But when I managed to beat the demon, it felt really good. It was great knowing that I beat this one boss that has been literally haunting me all this time. The good thing about struggling with a boss fight is you have the option to summon help. It adds a bit more health to the boss compared to fighting them solo, but it was still really helpful at times. Though before you can summon, your undead character needs to be human. Humanity is an important mechanic in Dark Souls. Not only can this get rid of your zombie appearance, it also lets you kindle bonfires to increase the amount of healing flasks you can carry. And it lets you summon NPCs and other players. You can even invade other players' worlds and get invaded yourself. I personally played as an undead character during my time online. I died so often that I thought it would be a waste of humanity if I kept playing as a human. The only times I switched to being human was when I wanted to summon and kindle bonfires. Which brings me to my experience with the co-op features. So I mentioned in my Bloodborne video that I never actually got to do co-op. I don't know if it was because people weren't playing it as much at the time, or I was having connection issues. Anyway, I was really happy when I didn't run into any problems with Dark Souls. But I feel like playing with other people here can make for a lot of fun stories. I remember the first time I summoned other players in the game, because I did it accidentally. I didn't know that interacting with signs on the floor summoned other people, and I interacted with 2 out of curiosity. So I ended up with 2 people following me on my way to the boss room. And wow, they took out the boss so fast I didn't even process what happened. I also have another story where I helped someone beat a boss in this sewer area. The person who summoned me didn't unlock the shortcut going to the boss room, and they were waiting for me to lead the way, which was anxiety-inducing because I just went through the area myself and it was like a maze. So being the newbie that I was, I had to clumsily go through the area and hope I was going in the right direction. Surprisingly, we managed to beat an invading player along the way, and we eventually reached the boss. I wasn't really damaging the boss, I was just slowly chipping away at their health. But soon enough, we managed to beat it, and man, it felt so good that I continued helping other people fight the same boss a couple more times. I got a lot of humanity as a reward, but I lost all of that shortly afterwards. I didn't know the next area I had to go through would be the infamous Blight Town. That was fun. Being summoned was an interesting experience though, because everyone had different playstyles and preferences. Some people were satisfied with summoning one person, and others just went for a full party, summoning 2 other players and an NPC. Sadly, I only experienced the multiplayer parts of Dark Souls for a short amount of time. The servers went down on PC because an exploit was found back in January. I actually waited for a few weeks, but it still wasn't fixed, so I decided to continue playing. It felt a little strange to play the game without seeing notes and phantoms of other players, but I got used to it after a while. The multiplayer aspect adds a lot to Dark Souls, but the game is just as fun in offline mode, and I honestly think that it was even more immersive. Playing online made me less aware of the little surprises that awaited every corner. I think it's because I relied too much on other people's messages. People often left notes that led to places that I wouldn't even notice, but with the servers down, I became more aware of my surroundings, so I found myself checking for hidden paths and items more often than before. But I'm 100% sure that I missed out on a lot of stuff. Like, one of the features that I missed out on is the Covenants. They're basically factions that you can join. Every Covenant has their own set of rules, but many are PvP and co-op focused, so if you do their tasks, you can get rewards that range from items to spells. I'm a little disappointed that I couldn't experience that side of each Covenant because of the servers going down, so I did the bare minimum of joining them to get bonus items. Before I go through with my final thoughts, I want to briefly talk about the DLC included in this remaster, Artorias of the Abyss. Knowing how cryptic Dark Souls can get with the gameplay, I got worried that I would miss this DLC and accidentally finish the game, so when I felt like I progressed a lot in my playthrough, I stopped and looked up how to access the DLC. And I am so glad I did that because I don't know how most people are supposed to figure this out. There's a lot of back and forth between multiple areas, and even when you finally get to access it, this chimera is the next challenge you need to face. You won't be able to access the rest of the DLC until you beat it, so it's basically a gatekeeper. What makes things worse is it's faster and stronger than some of the main game's bosses. So yeah, I had a great time fighting this one. I really enjoyed the DLC though. Like, I think the most interesting thing about it is the lore. If you've already spent a good amount of time playing through the main game, then things will definitely look familiar as you go through this DLC. But yeah, there are new items, areas, and enemies to explore. It took me like 8 hours to go through the entire thing. I had so much fun exploring every inch of the locations and finding new weapons and armor, and it was a real treat too to finally fight Artorias, which is a Souls boss that I've seen and heard about so many times online. My only complaint about the DLC is it just ends. I was expecting a cutscene or some form of closure, but nope, you can just leave after the final boss is defeated. I'm sure you can already guess what I think about the game. I absolutely love Dark Souls, and I really think it's a classic. It took me close to 60 hours to finish my playthrough, and by the time the credits rolled, I was filled with all kinds of emotions, like I just experienced something truly special. I'm sure the song that started playing in the credits was part of the reason too. It was really fun to experience all the iconic stuff about the game, including meeting Solaire for the first time. It felt like I witnessed the origin of a legendary character who spawned all the memes and out-of-context stuff I've seen about Dark Souls. I'm not saying he's not legendary. He definitely is, along with Zigmire the Onion Knight. Anyway, by the end of this video, I've only played Bloodborne and most recently Elden Ring so far, but the Soulsborne Ring games are shaping up to be one of my most favorite series ever. In terms of videos, this marks my second journey into FromSoft titles, and it's only the beginning since I plan on exploring every game in the series, little by little. If you're new to my channel and you want to be here to see it all, I'd appreciate it if you stayed for the ride. And of course, if you're interested in playing this too, Dark Souls Remastered is available on practically every platform. Let me know what you thought about the video. I didn't expect it to be this long actually. I guess I got way too passionate about writing my personal experiences on the script. Anyway, this video is long enough as it is, so I won't talk too much. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.